So I'm continuing with notes on the Havamal, and this is going to be notes number 8, which mostly covers friendship. I mean, it's verses 38 to 46, and it's heavily focused on how you treat or expect to be treated by a friend. Interestingly, verse 38 starts with the fact that you should not leave your home without your weapons, which in this day and age is kind of something you have to adapt, really. I mean, we go back to such and such era and that, and if you're leaving your farmstead or the village or the town or whatever, taking your weapons is a sensible precaution. You never know when you're going to need them. Even travelling from one place to the next a long time ago would have been more of an ordeal if you were travelling by foot, or let's say you were fortunate enough to have a horse or a cart, because obviously the world was, by perception, a lot smaller, far more dangerous. We're not just talking about criminals who might attempt to waylay you, but we're talking about the threats from the natural world, such things as wolves and lions, tigers and bears. It's that sort of, what we can take for granted today, a long time ago was something much more dangerous to undertake. I mean, it's, I say, we can jump in a car and travel 3 hours, cover 200 miles and be at our destination and not even think about it. But 1,000 years ago, that same journey would be a great undertaking with a great amount of risk. So Odin is advising you, never leave home without your weapons or your armour. Obviously, in today's world, we can change, we can adapt that to, it's sort of like a social armoury. I think it's a lot of things that sort of transfer to this modern world to when the Havamal would have been written down. It has relevance, but let's say it's what you might consider your sword and shield or spear, as is, and that's the thing that's referenced in the verse. Today is different. We have like a social armory. It's, I'm not really sure. It's one of those ideas, that concepts. I mean, what is your social armory? It's that sort of how you conduct yourself, really, which is discussed in other sections of the Havamal. And such as in this section, part of your social armory is by your friends, the support and the activity of your friendships, and where you choose to go. Again, in this modern world, it's easier to move around, but you still choose where you go to. And I suppose that's the social armory aspect of it, is you're not going to go somewhere where you're not welcome. We've got a lot more information now, so I don't know, it's that sort of, if you're of one specific sort of leaning that is in conflict with another, the chances are there's information that means that you might sort of say, well, we're going to go to such and such club, and know that it's of the antagonistic leaning. So it's like, well, I'm not going to go there. I can't go there because if I turn up there, such blah, 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 I won't have a good time. I think the other thing in the next section moving on from walking around with your spear or your sword or your shield. I mean, Odin advises against sort of how you foresee or intend for your savings to be used. Your wealth. I mean, I suppose it's one of those things. You can't take your wealth with you. You may intend for X, Y, and Z, children, family, friends, or whatever, to inherit your wealth. But of course, that's not how it might necessarily play out when you've shuffled off this mortal coil. I suppose it's one of those things, having experienced it for myself. A death in the family and inheritance can really, really bring out the true sides in people, and it can be ugly. Let's say, and it's what you intended isn't necessarily going to be followed, especially if you choose the wrong person to, say, be an executor of your will. Yeah. One of the other interesting things that gets dropped in, especially into Caroline Larrington translation, is that if you trust someone enough in your friendship that you consider them to be worthy of your friendship, it says about mixing your soul, which my personal understanding of that is the classic sort of cut your hand, they cut the hand, bind your blood, become blood brothers, or blood sisters. I mean, you are bound by a blood oath, which, one of the things that's really interesting, especially when you read some of the other sections of the Poetic Edda and that, is obviously Loki, in Lokasenna, claims that Odin and Loki are bound to each other by blood. So when you take into account this section of the Havamal, Odin and Loki at some stage had a very good friendship. So this section of the Havamal talks a lot about how you should treat friends and friends of friends, and refers to enemies. And I think we've probably all experienced the different gauged levels of friendship that you can experience in life. There's nothing better than having a really good friend. There's also nothing worse than being let down by a friend or friends. Again, going back to earlier notes and earlier sections of the Havamal, a good friend is going to defend you if something happens and your name or your reputation is besmirched. Being supported by a friend and being defended by a friend are two different things. I mean, it's not enough to have a friend's support in a time of crisis if they're not prepared to stand up and be counted and defend you. This is a faith, a religion that is measured by the oaths you make and the deeds you do. And I mean, I got a little video talking about sort of like the cry or the shout for a shield wall, and the fact that Norse pagans will support one another at the drop of a hat, which is great. I mean, I'm not saying anything against that in any way whatsoever. I think it's the general perception we should have and should expect is that a friend will stand by you. It's a measure of a friend if they stand by you or not. If they're not prepared to stand by you and to defend you, then the sad truth is, really, they're not a very good friend. Yes, there are instances where there might be mixed loyalties, but I think really it comes down to, you can't have one side being shady in an area of grey. They may be right, they may be wrong, and another friend that's of the same thing where they may be right, they may be wrong, and you are the friend in the middle and maintain friendships with both conflicting parties. Really, a good friend who's in the middle will tell both friends, other friends, where they're right, where they're wrong, and sort things out. And if you can't do that, if your decision is to stick your head in the sand and not get involved, then you're not a very good friend. There's a lot more I could say on this, but I'm going to end this video here for various reasons, personal reasons, and I think I've said enough for these notes, and I'll see you in the next section of notes. Thank you very much. Let's all be safe out there. Cheers.